Let's start. MTC. Day 07, Number 1. The free market has liberated people in a way that Marxism never could. What is more, as A. O. Hirschman, the Harvard economic historian, showed in his classic study The Passions and the Interests, the market was seen by Enlightenment thinkers Adam Smith, David Hume, and Montesquieu as a powerful solution to one of humanity's greatest traditional weaknesses, violence. A. O. Hirschman, The Passions and the Interests, Adam Smith, David Hume, Montesquieu. When two nations meet, said Montesquieu, they can do one of two things, they can wage war or they can trade. Montesquieu. If they wage war, both are likely to lose in the long run. If they trade, both will gain. That, of course, was the logic behind the establishment of the European Union. To lock together the destinies of its nations, especially France and Germany, in such a way that they would have an overwhelming interest not to wage war again as they had done to such devastating cost in the first half of the 20th century. 20. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Day 07, Number 2. One vivid example of how a market mindset can transform and undermine an institution is given by Dan Ariely in his book Predictably Irrational. Predictably Irrational, Dan Ariely. He tells the story of a daycare center in Israel that decided to fine parents who arrived late to pick up their children, in the hope that this would discourage them from doing so. In fact, the exact opposite happened. Before the imposition of fines, parents felt guilty about arriving late, and guilt was effective in ensuring that only a few did so. Once a fine was introduced, it seems that in the minds of the parents the entire scenario was changed from a social contract to a market one. Essentially, they were paying for the center to look after their children after hours. Some parents thought it worth the price, and the rate of late arrivals increased. Significantly, once the center abandoned the fines and went back to the previous arrangement, late arrivals remained at the high level they had reached during the period of the fines. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Day 07, Number 3. Brightness of sounds means much energy in higher frequencies, which can be calculated from the sounds easily. A violin has many more overtones compared to a flute and sounds brighter. An oboe is brighter than a classical guitar, and a crash cymbal brighter than a double bass. This is obvious, and indeed people like brightness. One reason is that it makes sound subjectively louder, which is part of the loudness war in modern electronic music, and in the classical music of the 19th century. 19. All sound engineers know that if they play back a track to a musician that just has recorded this track and add some higher frequencies, the musician will immediately like the track much better. But this is a short-lived effect, and in the long run, people find such sounds too bright. So it is wise not to play back such a track with too much brightness, as it normally takes quite some time to convince the musician that less brightness serves his music better in the end. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Day 07, Number 4. Anchoring bias describes the cognitive error you make when you tend to give more weight to information arriving early in a situation compared to information arriving later, regardless of the relative quality or relevance of that initial information. Whatever data is presented to you first when you start to look at a situation can form an anchor, and it becomes significantly more challenging to alter your mental course away from this anchor than it logically should be. A classic example of anchoring bias in emergency medicine is triage bias, where whatever the first impression you develop, or are given, about a patient tends to influence all subsequent providers seeing that patient. For example, imagine two patients presenting for emergency care with aching jaw pain that occasionally extends down to their chest. Differences in how the intake providers label the chart jaw pain vs. chest pain, for example, create anchors that might result in significant differences in how the patients are treated. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Day 07, Number 5-6. Stories populate our lives. If you are not a fan of stories, you might imagine that the best world is a world without them, where we can only see the facts in front of us. But to do this is to deny how our brains work, how they are designed to work. Evolution has given us minds that are alert to stories and suggestion because, through many hundreds of thousands of years of natural selection, minds that can attend to stories have been more successful at passing on their owner's genes. Think about what happens, for example, when animals face one another in conflict. They rarely plunge into battle right away. No, they first try to signal in all kinds of ways what the outcome of the battle is going to be. They puff up their chests, they roar, and they bare their fangs. Animals evolved to attend to stories and signals because these turn out to be an efficient way to navigate the world. If you and I were a pair of lions on the Serengeti, and we were trying to decide the strongest lion, it would be most foolish for both of us to plunge straight into a conflict. It is far better for each of us to make a show of strength, to tell the story of how our victory is inevitable. If one of those stories is much more convincing than the other, we might be able to agree on the outcome without actually having the fight. Day 8. MTC. Good job.